My parents always favored my brother, Kyle. When he went bankrupt, they sued me for millions, claiming I stole his destiny. They thought I'd fold to keep the family together. Instead, I dug up their financial secrets and prepared to destroy them in court. This is where the story truly begins, and you won't want to miss what happens. Make sure you're subscribed to see it through to the end. We're always curious. Where in the world are you all watching from today? Let us know in the comments. I was lying on the cool tile of my bathroom floor, pressing a damp washcloth against my forehead when the doorbell rang. It wasn't a polite, social ring. It was a persistent, demanding buzz that seemed to drill right through the migraines splitting my skull. I tried to stand, but the room tilted dangerously. I had been working 80-hour weeks for 6 months straight, finalizing the acquisition of my e-commerce agency's biggest competitor. I had successfully closed the deal 48 hours ago, and my body had immediately decided to shut down. The doctor had called it severe acute exhaustion and ordered strict bed rest, hydration, and absolutely no stress. The buzzer sounded again, longer this time. Aggressive. "I'm coming," I rasped, though no one could hear me. I pulled myself up using the marble vanity I had paid for in cash 2 years ago, catching a glimpse of myself in the mirror. I looked like a ghost, pale, dark circles under my eyes, wearing oversized sweatpants and a t-shirt stained with herbal tea. I didn't look like the CEO of a multi-million-dollar company. I looked like a child who wanted her mother. I made my way down the winding staircase of the Victorian restoration I called home. I loved this house. It was the first thing I bought when my business hit 7 figures. It was my sanctuary, my proof that I didn't need anyone else to survive. When I opened the heavy oak door, the blinding afternoon sun forced me to squint. A man stood on my porch. He was nondescript, wearing a generic windbreaker and holding a thick manila envelope. He looked at a clipboard, then up at me, his eyes scanning my disheveled appearance with mild judgment. "Sophia?" he asked. He didn't use a last name, just the first, checking the photo on his sheet. "Yes," my voice was barely a whisper. "Can I help you?" "You've been served," he said flatly, thrusting the heavy envelope into my chest. Before I could ask what he was talking about, before I could even grip the package properly, he turned and walked briskly down the driveway to his idling sedan. I stood there, swaying slightly, the heavy envelope feeling like a lead weight in my hands. My heart began to hammer against my ribs, a painful, erratic rhythm that made my migraine flare with blinding intensity. I closed the door and slid down against it, my legs giving out. With trembling fingers, I tore open the flap. Superior Court, Civil Division. Plaintiffs, Martha redacted and Finley redacted. Defendant, Sophia redacted. My parents. I blinked, trying to clear the fog from my vision. I assumed it was a mistake. Maybe they were suing someone else and had sent the papers to my house for safekeeping. But as I turned the page, the legal jargon transformed into a narrative of pure insanity. Complaint for damages, misappropriation of family assets, theft of intellectual property, breach of implied familial contract. I read the summary, my breath hitching in my throat. The lawsuit alleged that the business I had built from my college dorm room, the business I had coded, marketed, and bled for, was actually based on proprietary concepts developed by my brother, Kyle, during family dinners. It claimed that by launching the company without him, I had stolen the future he was explicitly promised, resulting in his recent financial insolvency. They weren't just asking for a share. They were suing me for $5 million in damages and seeking an injunction to freeze my personal assets. I dropped the papers. They scattered across the hardwood floor like dead leaves. My phone buzzed in my pocket. It was my mother, Martha. The timing was too precise to be a coincidence. She knew the server had just left. I stared at the screen, the word "Mom" flashing innocently, masking the venom behind the call. I felt a wave of nausea so strong I had to close my eyes. I had spent my entire life trying to be good enough for them, trying to prove that I was worthy of the same love they effortlessly poured into Kyle. I had bought them cars. I had paid off their mortgage. I had done everything right. And their response was to try and destroy me when I was at my weakest. I didn't answer the phone. I just sat there in the hallway of the house I had bought with my own sweat and tears, realizing that the people who were supposed to protect me from the world had just become my most dangerous predators. The betrayal was worse than the diagnosis itself. It was a terminal malignancy and the heart of my family. The phone stopped ringing, leaving a silence in the hallway that was louder than the noise. I didn't move for a long time. The adrenaline was warring with the exhaustion, creating a strange, vibrating numbness in my limbs. I needed to understand. The logical part of my brain, the CEO part that solved crises for a living, began to boot up, overriding the hurt daughter. I picked up the papers again, forcing myself to read past the initial shock. Paragraph 4. The defendant, Sophia, utilized family resources, specifically the emotional and intellectual labor of the plaintiff's son, Kyle, to construct her enterprise. Paragraph 12. Due to the defendant's theft of opportunity, Kyle has suffered irreparable financial harm, leading to his current state of bankruptcy. I laughed. It was a dry, cracking sound that hurt my throat. Emotional labor? Kyle hadn't worked a day in his life. While I was pulling all-nighters coding my first website, Kyle was partying in Ibiza on my parents' dime. The phone buzzed again. This time I answered. Sophia, it was Martha. Her voice was calm, almost pleasant. It was the voice she used when she was hosting a dinner party, the voice that hid 1,000 judgments. I got the papers, Martha, I said, my voice steady despite the pounding in my head. I couldn't bring myself to call her mom. Not right now. Oh, good, she said, as if we were discussing a package from Amazon. I was worried the server might have trouble finding that fortress of yours. What is this? I asked, gripping the phone so hard my knuckles turned white. You're suing me for $5 million. Are you insane? Lower your voice, Sophia. It's unbecoming, she scolded gently. We're not insane. We're just correcting an imbalance. We know Kyle is in trouble. He's filed for Chapter 7. He's going to lose his condo, his car, everything. And there you are, sitting in that mansion with more money than you could spend in 10 lifetimes. I earned this, I spat out. I worked 3 jobs in college. I built this business from nothing. Kyle blew his trust fund on crypto scams and luxury watches. That's not my fault. It's family money, Sophia, she said, her tone hardening. We invested in you. We fed you, clothed you, put a roof over your head. You took those resources and built a kingdom, leaving your brother behind. It's not right. He was meant to be the one who succeeded. We all know that. He was meant to succeed, I repeated, incredulous. Because he's a man, is that it? Because he is special, Sophia. He has a vision. You're a worker. You're good at executing things, sure. But Kyle has the spark. You stole his light. This lawsuit is just a way to make sure the assets are distributed fairly, as they should have been from the start. Fairly? I stood up, the dizziness momentarily forgotten. You want to liquidate my company to pay off his gambling debts. It's not gambling, it was investment bad luck, she corrected quickly. Look, we don't want a court battle. It's messy. Just sign the settlement agreement attached to the back. Transfer the $5 million to the family trust, we've made Finley the trustee, and we'll drop the suit. We can all have Christmas dinner together and put this behind us. You want me to pay you $5 million to make you go away? Think of it as retroactive tuition, she said lightly. Or a thank you for raising you. We need to save Kyle, Sophia. It's your duty as his sister. If you don't, well, the lawsuit will freeze your accounts. Can your precious business survive months of litigation with frozen assets? Can your reputation survive the headlines? Tech CEO sued by destitute parents for fraud. The threat hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. She was blackmailing me. My own mother was holding a gun to the head of the company I built to save the son she actually loved. I'm not signing anything, I said, my voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. Don't be stubborn, dear. You can't win. We have statements from Kyle, witnesses who remember him talking about these business ideas years ago. It's your word against the family. I looked at the paperwork scattered on the floor. I looked at the specific date listed on the breach of contract claim, a date from 6 years ago. A cold, sharp clarity washed over me. The migraine didn't vanish, but it was pushed behind a wall of icy rage. You really think you have everything covered, don't you? I asked. We have the best lawyers in the city, Sophia. Finley made sure of it. Okay, I said, I'll see you in court. Sophia, don't be ridiculous. I hung up. I stared at the phone, my breathing shallow. They thought they had me cornered. They thought I was the same desperate little girl who used to beg for their approval, who would do anything to stop them from looking at me with disappointment. They thought they could bully me into submission because they assumed I ad played by their rules. But they had forgotten one crucial thing. I was a hoarder of information. I walked over to the wall safe hidden behind a painting in my study. A cliché, perhaps, but effective. I spun the dial and pulled the heavy door open. Inside were a stack of hard drives and a metal lockbox I hadn't opened since I was 18. Martha and Finley thought money was the only power that mattered. They didn't realize that in my world, paper trails were the ultimate weapon. And I had kept the receipts for every single transaction, every conversation, and every signature for the last decade. To understand why this lawsuit wasn't just a legal attack, but a spiritual evisceration, you have to understand the ecosystem of my childhood. I was the practice child. I was born 3 years before Kyle. My parents, Finley and Martha, were young and relatively broke then. I grew up in hand-me-downs, playing quietly in the corner of their cramped apartment while they worked late. I learned early on that the best way to be loved was to be invisible and low maintenance. Then Kyle was born, and suddenly the sun came out. Finley's career in commercial real estate took off the same year Kyle arrived. They took it as a sign. Kyle was their good luck charm, their golden boy. They moved to the suburbs, bought a BMW, and started saving for Kyle's future. Not our future, Kyle's. I remember when I was 16, I asked for a car. I had a job at a diner, I was getting straight A's, and I needed to get to my AP classes. Martha had sighed, looking at me over her reading glasses like I had asked for a kidney. We just can't afford it right now, Sophia. Things are tight. 2 weeks later, for Kyle's 13th birthday, they bought him a dirt bike and a complete set of professional gaming equipment. It cost 3 times what the used Honda I wanted would have cost. When I confronted Finley about it, he just shrugged, sipping his scotch. Kyle needs outlets for his creativity. He's going to be an innovator. Well, you're pragmatic, Sophia. You know how to work. It's good for your character to earn things. So I did. I earned everything. I got a full-ride scholarship to the state university because I knew they wouldn't pay a dime. I worked 3 jobs, barista at 5 a.m., library assistant at noon, and freelance web designer at night. I barely slept. I ate instant noodles. I missed parties. Meanwhile, Kyle barely graduated high school, but that didn't matter. Finley and Martha paid his tuition to a private liberal arts college where he majored in entrepreneurial studies. They paid his rent for a luxury apartment. They gave him a stipend of $3,000 a month for networking expenses. I watched from the sidelines as he burned through their money. He started a t-shirt brand that failed. He invested in a crypto coin that turned out to be a rug pull. He tried to become a lifestyle influencer, but only succeeded in influencing my parents to buy him a Range Rover so he looked the part. And through it all, Martha was the architect. Martha wasn't just a mother. She was a manager of a brand that didn't exist. She was a woman obsessed with appearances. She had been a beauty pageant runner-up in her youth and never got over the fact that she didn't take the crown. She projected all that frustrated ambition onto Kyle. She was the one who curated the lies. When Kyle flunked out of a class, Martha told the neighbors the professor was intimidated by Kyle's intellect. When Kyle got a DUI, Martha spun it as him being exhausted from his charity work. She was a master manipulator, a woman who could insult you with a compliment and stab you with a smile. She wore Chanel suits she couldn't quite afford and spoke in a soft, melodic voice that masked a core of absolute steel. She viewed me not as a daughter, but as a utility. I was the backup generator, ignored until the power went out. And now the power was out. I sat at my desk, the lockbox open in front of me. I thought about the man who must be driving this behind the scenes. It wasn't Kyle. Kyle was too lazy to draft a lawsuit this complex. And while Finley was greedy, he was also lazy. He preferred the path of least resistance. No, this was Martha. I could picture her sitting at their mahogany dining table, legal pads spread out, sipping her Chardonnay. I could hear her rationalizing it. Sophia has so much, she doesn't need all of it. She doesn't have a family to support. Kyle needs a fresh start. It's only fair. She would have found a lawyer who was just as hungry and unscrupulous as she was. She would have charmed him, played the victim, painted me as the ungrateful daughter who stole the family jewels and ran away. She had formally introduced herself into my life not as a mother, but as a plaintiff. I picked up a document from the bottom of the lockbox. The paper was yellowing slightly. It was dated from the summer before my freshman year of call. Elliot. My eyes scanned the text, and a cold, hard smile touched my lips. Martha and Finley were so arrogant. They were so convinced of their own narrative that they had forgotten the explicit measures they had taken to ensure I never asked them for money. They had been so afraid I would drain their resources that they had legally severed ties with my financial future years ago. I wasn't just going to win this lawsuit, I was going to humiliate them. The document in my hands was titled Agreement of Financial Severance and Release of Parental Liability. I sat back in my chair, the leather creaking in the silence of my study. I remembered the day I signed it. It was 2 days after my 18th birthday. Martha and Finley had sat me down at the kitchen table, the same table where they had just planned Kyle's graduation trip to Europe, and told me that if I wanted to attend university, I was on my own. But they were clever. They didn't just want to stop paying. They wanted to ensure I couldn't come back later claiming they had neglected me. They had drafted this document, likely downloaded from a legal template site, stating that I, Sophia, acknowledged that I was an independent adult, and that my parents had fulfilled all financial obligations, and that I waived any future claim to family assets, support, or estate in exchange for immediate emancipation from household rules. They had made me sign it so they could kick me out without guilt. They had wanted to protect their money from me. They never imagined that 6 years later, this piece of paper would be the ironclad shield protecting my money from them. I didn't smile. The realization didn't bring joy. It brought a cold, calculated focus. The migraine finally receded, replaced by the sharp clarity of battle. I picked up my phone and dialed. Marcus, I said when the voice on the other end answered. Marcus Vance was the kind of lawyer who scared other lawyers. He was expensive, aggressive, and specialized in corporate litigation and asset protection. I have a situation. I need you to clear your schedule for tomorrow morning. Sophia, he sounded surprised. I thought you were on bed rest. Did the acquisition deal hit a snag? The deal is fine. This is personal. My parents are suing me for $5 million. There was a pause on the line. I'm sorry, did you say your parents? Yes, they're claiming I stole my business idea from my brother. They've filed for an injunction to freeze my accounts. That's ambitious, Marcus said, his tone shifting from friendly to professional. Send me the complaint. I'll meet you at your office at 8:00 a.m. And Sophia, don't talk to them, don't text them, don't even look in their direction. I know the drill, I said. But Marcus, I need more than a defense. I need an autopsy. What do you mean? They wouldn't do this unless they were desperate. Martha cares about her reputation more than anything. Dragging this into public court exposes them too. If they're willing to risk that, it means the hole Kyle dug isn't just a divot. It's a grave. I need to know exactly how deep it is. I can put a forensic accountant on it. We can run a background check on the brother, check for liens, judgments, the works. Do it, I commanded. Turn over every rock. If Kyle bought a stick of gum in the last 5 years, I want to know about it. I spent the rest of the night not sleeping, but preparing. I pulled every email I had ever exchanged with Kyle. I went through old chat logs from 6 years ago. The lawsuit claimed Kyle had the idea for my e-commerce platform, a specific AI-driven inventory management system, during family brainstorming sessions in 2018. I searched my archives. In 2018, I found an email from Kyle titled, "Yo, need cash. Hey Soph, Mom said you're good with computers. Can you fix my laptop? I spilled beer on it. Also, can you lend me $500? I have a sure thing investment coming up. It's this app that tracks dog walking routes. Gonna be huge." I screenshotted it. I found another from 3 months later. "Soph, seriously, stop being a bitch and answer Mom. Also, do you think I should drop out and become a DJ? I feel like my creative energy is being stifled by Econ 101. I screenshotted that too. There wasn't a single mention of inventory management, AI, or e-commerce. There was only a documented history of a man-child drifting from one delusion to another, asking his younger sister for money while insulting her. By the time the sun came up, I had a timeline of my own creation. I had Git commit logs showing my code updates at 3:00 a.m. I had server receipts in my name. I had the initial LLC filing where I was the sole signatory. I showered, dressed in my sharpest charcoal suit, the one I wore to close the acquisition, and drove to my office. I wasn't the sick daughter anymore. I was the CEO. The settlement conference was scheduled for 3 days later. My refusal to settle over the Hone had apparently agitated them, so their lawyer had requested an in-person meeting to discuss the gravity of the situation before we proceed to discovery. Translation: they wanted to intimidate me in a room. The meeting was held at their lawyer's office, a boutique firm in downtown that smelled of stale coffee and desperation. I walked in with Marcus flanking me. Martha and Finley were already there, sitting on one side of the long conference table. Kyle wasn't present. Of course not. He was too fragile for the crossfire. Martha looked impeccable. She was wearing a cream-colored suit, her hair perfectly coiffed. She looked at me with sad, doe-like eyes, playing the part of the heartbroken mother to perfection. Finley wouldn't meet my gaze. He was aggressively studying a smudge on the table. Their lawyer, a man named Mr. Sterling who wore a suit that was slightly too shiny, stood up. "Ms. Last Name, thank you for coming. We hope we can resolve this amicably." I didn't shake his hand. I sat down, placed my phone on the table face down, and folded my hands. "Let's hear it." Mr. Sterling cleared his throat. "Look, we all know court is expensive. My clients are simply asking for what is fair. Your brother, Kyle, contributed significant intellectual property to the foundation of your company. We have sworn affidavits from your parents stating that the core algorithm was discussed at the dinner table in 2018. "The dinner table," Marcus repeated, his voice dry. "You mean the table Sophia was usually excused from so she could go work her night shift?" "We have witnesses," Martha interjected softly. "Sophia, you remember. You took notes. You always took notes when Kyle spoke. We thought you were just being a supportive sister. We didn't know you were harvesting his genius." "Harvesting his genius," I repeated, tasting the absurdity of the words. "Martha, the only thing Kyle has ever successfully harvested is your bank account." "Sophia," Finley snapped, finally looking up, his face was red. "Show some respect. Your brother is going through a hard time, he's ill." "He's broke, Finley. There's a difference," I countered coolly. "He is destitute because you stole his future," Martha cried out, a single, perfect tear sliding down her cheek. "You have millions, Sophia, millions, and you won't even help your own flesh and blood. We're not asking for everything, just the 5 million. It's a drop in the bucket for you. It settles his debts, gets him back on his feet, and we sign a non-disclosure. No one has to know you stole the idea. I didn't steal anything, I said, my voice steady, and I'm not paying you a cent. Mr. Sterling leaned forward. Then we proceed to court. We will subpoena your hard drives. We will depose your employees. We will paint a picture of a ruthless, cold-hearted sister who cannibalized her family to get ahead. The press loves a story like that. The ice queen of tech. Can your stock price handle that? The room went silent. It was a direct threat. Pay up or we destroy your reputation. I looked at Marcus. He gave me a barely perceptible nod. It was time. I reached into my briefcase and pulled out a single folder. I slid it across the table toward Mr. Sterling. Before you file for discovery, I said, you might want to review the statute of limitations on familial claims. And, more importantly, you might want to read the contract my parents drafted and forced me to sign 6 years ago. Mr. Sterling opened the folder. He read the title. His eyebrows twitched. Martha frowned. What is that? That, I said, looking directly into her eyes, is the agreement of financial severance you made me sign before you kicked me out. Do you remember? Paragraph 4, Clause B. The undersigned parties agree that all future financial endeavors, assets, and liabilities are the sole responsibility of the individual, and no familial claim to income or property shall exist hereafter. Martha's face went pale. That was just for financial aid. It wasn't meant for this. It's a notarized legal contract, Martha, I said. You wanted to ensure I never came back asking for money. In doing so, you legally waived your right to ever ask me for money. You also waived any claim to family intellectual property because you declared me a distinct, severed financial entity. Mr. Sterling was reading the document rapidly, sweat beading on his forehead. He leaned over and whispered something frantically to Finley. Finley's face turned a shade of purple I hadn't seen since I crashed his car when I was 16. You ungrateful little. I'd be careful, Finley, Marcus warned, his voice like a whip crack. This is a trick, Martha hissed, her mask slipping. The sweet mother was gone, the vindictive manager was back. You manipulated us, you were planning this. I was 18. I slammed my hand on the table, the sound echoing like a gunshot. I was a child you were throw. Ing away, you wrote the contract. You made me sign it because you wanted to buy a boat instead of paying for my dorm room. You didn't invest in me. You bet against me. And now that I've won, you want to cash in a ticket you tore up 6 years ago. We need that money, Finley blurted out. The anger drained out of him, replaced by a terrifying, raw panic. You don't understand. The creditors. They aren't the bank, Sophia. The room went dead silent. Martha kicked him under the table hard. Finley, shut up. I looked from Finley to Martha. The panic in his eyes was real. This wasn't just about Kyle's credit card debt. The creditors aren't the bank, I asked slowly. Who does Kyle owe money to? It doesn't matter, Mr. Sterling interrupted, closing the folder. This document, it presents a hurdle, but it's not insurmountable. We can argue it was signed under duress or that it's unconscionable. You can try, Marcus said, standing up. But we'll countersue for abuse of process and filing a frivolous claim, and we will seek legal fees. And Sophia will testify about the creditors you just mentioned. We're done here, I said, standing up. I looked down at my parents. They looked small. Withdraw the lawsuit by noon tomorrow, or I release this contract to the press myself. I think the headline, Parents Sue Successful Daughter After Disowning Her for Being Poor, will track pretty well. We walked out. But as we reached the elevator, I felt a knot in my stomach. Finley's slip-up haunted me. The creditors aren't the bank. Marcus, I said as the elevator doors closed. Expedite the forensic accounting. Something is wrong. Kyle didn't just lose money, he lost the wrong people's money. I thought the confrontation would end it. I thought the contract was the checkmate. I underestimated Martha's capacity for self-delusion and spite. They didn't withdraw the lawsuit. Instead, the next morning, my PR manager called me at 6:00 a.m. Sophia, don't open LinkedIn or Twitter. Actually, just don't open the internet. What did they do? I asked, rubbing sleep from my eyes. There's an article on a popular tech gossip blog. Sources claim e-commerce darling Sophia, last name, built her empire on stolen code from destitute brother. It's trending, and there's a video. I opened the link against her advice. It was a video of Martha. She was standing in front of their house, which looked noticeably unkempt, the lawn overgrown, crying into the camera. We just wanted her to be fair, she sobbed. Kyle worked so hard on those algorithms. He has a brilliant mind, but he struggles with mental health. And Sophia took advantage of that. She took his notebooks and locked him out. Now he's losing his home, and she won't even return our calls. It was a masterclass in manipulation. She didn't mention the lawsuit or the money directly. She focused on the emotional narrative. Big sister bullies mentally ill brother. My inbox was already filling up with hate mail. A tentative partner for our upcoming logistics expansion emailed to say they were pausing negotiations pending clarity on the IP dispute. I was shaking with rage. I wanted to scream. I wanted to drive to their house and scream in their faces. Focus, I told myself. Don't react, execute. I went to the office. The mood was grim. My employees were looking at me sideways. I called an all-hands meeting and assured them the allegations were false and that legal action was pending. They nodded, but I could see the doubt. At 2:00 p.m., the forensic accountant, a woman named Dr. Eris, arrived. She looked grave. She was carrying a thick binder. Sophia, she said, shutting the door to my office and locking it. We have a problem, and it's not just the lawsuit. Tell me, I said. We ran a deep dive on your parents' finances and Kyle's history. You were right about the creditors not being the bank. Kyle got involved with some unlicensed private lenders, loan sharks, essentially, about 2 years ago to fund a crypto mining farm that didn't exist. He owes them about $600,000. The interest is compounding daily. $600,000, I exhaled. That's bad, but it's not $5 million. That's just the tip of the iceberg, Dr. Eris continued. To pay the interest on those loans, your parents have been bleeding themselves dry. They liquidated their 401ks. They took out a second mortgage. But 6 months ago, they ran out of liquid cash. So they sued me, I concluded. No, Dr. Eris said. They sued you after they tried the other option. She opened the binder and slid a document toward me. It was a loan application for a small business administration loan, a pandemic relief loan. Value, $450,000. The applicant is Kyle, last name, Consulting, Dr. Eris said, but look at the guarantor. I looked at the signature line. Sophia, last name. My signature, or rather, a shaky, traced approximation of it. They forged my signa. Ture, I whispered. The room spun. They took out a federal loan in my name. They used your social security number, Dr. Eris confirmed. They likely had it from when you were a dependent. They listed you as a 50% partner to leverage your credit score, which is excellent, versus Kyle's, which is non-existent. The loan was approved. The money was deposited into a joint account that Kyle controlled. It's gone, and the loan is now in default. I felt like I had been punched in the gut. This wasn't just a civil dispute anymore. This was identity theft. This was federal bank fraud. If I didn't report this, and the government came looking for that money, I could be liable. I could go to prison as an accomplice if I appeared to cover it up. There's more, Dr. Eris said gently. Because the loan is in default, the bank has started an investigation. Your parents know this. They aren't suing you just for the cash, Sophia. They are suing you to create a legal paper trail that establishes a partnership existed. If they win, or if you settle and admit to sharing assets, it validates the fraudulent loan application retroactively. They are trying to frame you for the loan they stole. I stared at the paper. The betrayal was total. They weren't just harvesting me, they were setting me up to take the fall for their crimes. They were willing to send me to federal prison to save Kyle from his own mess. My phone rang. It was Martha again. I stared at the screen. The fear was gone. The hurt was gone. All that was left was a cold, hard resolve. Dr. Eris, I said, not looking up. Package everything. The forensic report, the forgery analysis, the timeline of the loan usage. Send it to Marcus. What are you going to do? I'm going to call the FBI, I said. But first, I'm going to make sure the world knows exactly who Martha and Finley last name really are. I picked up the phone. Hello, Martha, I said. Sophia, she sounded breathless. Have you reconsidered? The press is getting ugly. We can make it stop. I have, I lied. I want to end this. I'm ready to talk terms. Oh, thank God, she exhaled. I knew you'd come to your senses. I'll meet you, I said, but not at a lawyer's office. Let's do it at the house. The family home. Tonight, I'll bring the checkbook. Perfect, she said. We'll have dinner ready. Don't bother, I said. I won't be staying long. I pulled into the driveway of my childhood home at 7:58 p.m. The house was a sprawling colonial that Martha kept manicured to within an inch of its life. But tonight, under the harsh glare of the motion sensor floodlights, I saw the cracks. The paint was peeling around the window frames. The pristine lawn was spotted with brown patches of neglect. It was a perfect metaphor for the people living inside, a grand facade rotting from the inside out. I sat in my car for a moment, gripping the steering wheel. In the passenger seat sat a thick accordion folder containing the evidence Dr. Eris had compiled, the forensic accounting, the forgery analysis, and the affidavit I had sworn out an hour ago. I checked my rearview mirror. A black sedan was parked 3 houses down, its lights off. I flashed my high beams once. The sedan flashed back. Okay, I whispered to myself, let's finish this. I walked up the path. Before I could ring the bell, the door swung open. Martha stood there, wearing an apron over her dress, a strained smile plastered across her face. Sophia, she exclaimed, reaching out as if to hug me. I stepped neatly to the side, walking past her into the foyer. Hello, Martha. The house smelled of roast beef and rosemary, the specific meal she used to make for special occasions. It was a scent that used to make me feel safe, but now it just smelled like a trap. In the dining room, Finley and Kyle were already seated. Finley was pouring wine with a shaking hand. Kyle looked terrible. He was gaunt, his skin sallow, wearing a hoodie that looked like he hadn't changed in days. When he saw me, he didn't look angry. He looked defeated. Sophia, Finley said, his voice too loud. Glad you could make it. Have a seat. Martha made your favorite. She made roast beef, I corrected, remaining standing. Kyle's favorite. My favorite was always lasagna, but you said it was too messy to make. The silence that followed was thick enough to choke on. Well, Martha fluttered in, wiping her hands on a towel. Let's not dwell on the past. We're here to fix the future. Sit, sit. I pulled out a chair but didn't sit. I placed the heavy folder on the table, right next to the crystal gravy boat. I'm not here to eat, I said. You said you wanted a check. You said if I paid the $5 million, the lawsuit goes away. It's the only way, Soph, Kyle mumbled, staring at his empty plate. These guys, the people I owe, they don't play around. I know about the loan sharks, Kyle, I said softly. Kyle looked up, fear flashing in his eyes. But that's not why we're here, Martha interjected quickly, sitting down and placing a hand on Kyle's arm. We're here to settle the family dispute. Mr. Sterling has the papers ready for you to sign. Once the transfer is verified, we withdraw the suit with prejudice. She slid a document across the table. It was a settlement agreement. It included a clause admitting that I had borrowed Kyle's IP. I'm not signing that, I said. Sophia, we discussed this, Finley warned, his face reddening. If you leave here without signing, the trial goes forward. The press isn't going to care about a civil suit, I cut him off. Not when they hear about the federal investigation. Martha froze. Her hand tightened on Kyle's arm until his knuckles turned white. What are you talking about? I opened the folder. I took out the SBA loan application. I held it up. April 2020, I read. Application for the Paycheck Protection Program and Economic Injury Disaster Loan. Applicant, Kyle last name, Consulting. Co-guarantor, Sophia last name. Kyle frowned, looking confused. I didn't apply for that with you. Mom said she handled the financing. Mom handled it, all right, I said, looking directly at Martha. She used my social security number. She forged my signature. She took out $450,000 in my name, funneling it through a joint account she opened using my old high school ID. That's a lie, Martha hissed. Her voice had dropped an octave. The sweet mother was gone. You agreed to help your brother. You signed those papers. I have a handwriting expert who says otherwise, I countered. And I have your IP address logged on the application submission. And I have the bank records showing the money wasn't used for a business. It was used to pay off the mortgage arrears on this house. It was used to buy Finley a new lease on his Mercedes. And it was used to pay the interest, just the interest, on Kyle's gambling debts. Gambling? Kyle's head snapped up. You said you were investing it in the market. Shut up, Kyle, Finley roared, slamming his fist on the table. No, let him speak, I said, my voice rising. Kyle, they didn't just steal from me, they set you up. Look at the default terms. I tossed the page at him. If the loan isn't repaid, the primary applicant is liable for criminal prosecution for fraud. I'm just the guarantor, I'd just lose money. You'd go to prison. Kyle picked up the paper, his hands trembling. He read the lines I had highlighted. He looked at his mother. Mom, you told me this was a grant. You said we didn't have to pay it back. It was supposed to be forgiven, Martha shrieked, standing up. It would have been forgiven if the government hadn't changed the rules. We did it for you, Kyle. Everything was for you. You made me a felon? Kyle's voice cracked. He sounded like a child. You forged Sophia's name and made me the face of a $500,000 fraud. We had to, Martha cried, tears streaming down her face, but they were tears of rage, not sorrow. Sophia wasn't helping. She had all that money, sitting there hoarding it while we drowned. It was our money, we made her. We were entitled to it. So you sued me, I said, stepping closer to the table. Not because you thought you could win, but because you needed a legal judgment to validate the partnership, so the bank wouldn't look too closely at the fraud. You were going to use the settlement money to pay off the loan before the FBI knocked on the door. Martha glared at me with pure, unadulterated hatred. You selfish, ungrateful little bitch. You have destroyed this family. No, Martha, I said, feeling a strange sense of calm wash over me. I just turned on the lights. You have no proof, Finley sputtered, standing up to join his wife. It's your word against ours. We'll say you authorized it verbally. You can tell that to Special Agent Miller, I said. I turned and walked to the front door. I opened it wide. The black sedan was already in the driveway. 2 agents in FBI windbreakers were walking up the steps. Behind them, a local police cruiser was pulling in, lights flashing silently. Martha and Finley last name, the lead agent announced, stepping into the foyer. I have a warrant for your arrest on charges of bank fraud, aggravated identity theft, and conspiracy to commit wire fraud. Martha screamed. It was a primal, animalistic sound. She lunged, not at the police, but at me. You did this, she shrieked, clawing at the air before the agents restrained her. I gave you life, you owe me everything. I watched as they handcuffed her. I watched as they handcuffed Finley, who was weeping openly, muttering about his heart condition. And then I looked at Kyle. He wasn't moving. He was sitting at the dining table, the cold roast beef in front of him, staring at the loan document. The police officer approached him gently. Sir, I need to ask you some questions. Kyle looked up. He looked at me. For the first time in 20 years, the arrogance was gone. The entitlement was gone. All that was left was a scared young man who realized he had been the golden goose they were planning to cook all along. I didn't know, Soph, he whispered. Tears welled in his eyes. I swear to God, I didn't know they used your name. I know, I said softly, and I did. Kyle was a leech, yes, but he wasn't a criminal mastermind. He was just another victim of Martha's ambition, crippled by her enabling just as I had been hardened by her neglect. "Tell them the truth, Kyle," I said. "It's the only way you survive this." The downfall was swift, brutal, and public. Because of the high profile of my company and the sensational nature of the parents suing successful daughter angle, the press ate it up. But the narrative flipped overnight. The headlines changed from tech CEO accused of theft to suburban couple charged in massive pandemic loan fraud scheme targeting own daughter. My reputation didn't just recover, it soared. Investors viewed me as a titan of resilience. The acquisition deal closed 2 weeks later at a valuation 15% higher than the initial offer. Martha and Finley were denied bail. The flight risk was considered too high, given Finley's offshore accounts, which Dr. Aris had also found, containing a pitiful few $1,000s he had tried to hide. The trial was short. Faced with the overwhelming evidence, the IP traces, the handwriting analysis, and the testimony of the forensic accountant, their defense attorney advised them to take a plea deal. They pleaded guilty to 2 counts of bank fraud and 1 count of aggravated identity theft. Martha was sentenced to 6 years in federal prison. Finley got 4. They lost the house, the cars, and every penny of retirement savings they had left to restitution. And then there was Kyle. I sat on a bench in the hallway of the federal courthouse, waiting. The doors opened and Kyle walked out. He wasn't in handcuffs, because he had cooperated fully, testifying against our parents and proving he had no knowledge of the forgery. He had avoided prison time. He was sentenced to probation and mandated financial literacy courses, plus community service. He saw me and stopped. He looked older. He was wearing a cheap suit, ill-fitting and wrinkled. He looked like what he was, a man starting from zero at 27. He walked over, stopping a few feet away. He didn't ask for money. He didn't ask for a ride. "They're gone," he said. His voice was hollow. For a while, I agreed. "I'm sorry," he said. He looked down at his shoes. "I know that doesn't fix it. I know I was awful to you. I thought I was better than you because they told me I was. I believed the hype." "I know," I said. "I have a job," he said, a hint of pride breaking through the shame. "It's at a warehouse, stocking shelves, minimum wage. I live in a studio apartment above a garage. It's really hard, Sophia." "It is," I said, "but it's yours, you're earning it." He looked up at me, searching my face for something. Maybe forgiveness, maybe a check, maybe a return to the way things were. "Can we," he started, then stopped. "Can I call you sometime?" I looked at him. I felt a pang of sadness for the brother I never really had, for the family that could have been if our parents hadn't been monsters. But I also felt the weight of the scars they had left. "Not yet," I said honestly. "Maybe one day, but right now, you need to figure out who Kyle is when he's not the golden child. And I need to figure out who I am when I'm not fighting for my life." He nodded, swallowing hard. "Fair enough." "Good luck, Kyle," I said. "You too, Soph." He turned and walked away, down the long marble corridor, out into the bright sunlight of a world where he was finally, terrifyingly, free. I walked out the other set of doors. Marcus was waiting for me by my car. "It's done?" he asked. "It's done," I said. I got into my car and drove. I didn't go back to the office. I didn't go back to the big Victorian house. I drove to the coast, parking on a bluff overlooking the ocean. I sat there for a long time, watching the waves crash against the rocks. I took out my phone. I had a voicemail from Martha, sent from the prison phone just before her processing was complete. I didn't listen to it. I pressed delete. Then I opened my banking app. I transferred the legal fees to Marcus. I looked at the balance that remained, the millions I had made, the empire I had built. For years, every dollar had been a shield, a way to prove I was safe. But sitting there, with the salt air filling my lungs, I realized I didn't need the money to feel safe anymore. I had faced the people who made me feel small, and I had watched them shrink. I was 24 years old. I had no parents, no brother, and a business to run. I was alone. But for the RSD time in my life, I wasn't lonely. I was just free.